Hello, and welcome to the global seminar of the Global Columbia Collaboratory. My name is Gail Lynch, and I'm the program director of the Columbia Global Collaboratory, and we're so honored that you've joined us here today for the first seminar in a global series focused on flourishing African cities, urban development, food systems, and clean energy. This is a series that invites experts to step into the collaboratory to discuss ways deliberate city planning efforts in Africa's largest cities can address pressing global needs, such as effective food systems, clean energy, and urban planning, while also addressing sustainability and resiliency. But before we begin this important session, and especially for those of you joining us for the first time today, I want to provide a bit of background about the Global Columbia Collaboratory. Columbia University's Center for Undergraduate Global Engagement, in partnership with the Columbia Global Centers and Columbia World Projects, launched the Collaboratory in May 2020 as a virtual exchange initiative to support our students around the world during the pandemic. And the Collaboratory brings students, thought leaders, educators, others together. We promote cross-cultural communication and competency, and we enhance skills and global competencies of our students to allow them to reflect, ideate, and collaborate to make a difference in the world. Students have participated from over 45 countries and are drawn from all 3 undergraduate schools at Columbia, as well as schools from around the world. This fall, we have 50 students coming from 13 countries, representing 16 universities. And they're tuning in this morning from across Africa, Asia, and Europe, including New York, of course, where Columbia University is, Nairobi, Banjul in the Gambia, Tabakunda in Senegal, Mumbai, Dublin, Taipei, Munich, and many more, just to name a few. Our students have submitted questions for our panelists, and I encourage our global audience to submit questions as well. And I also want to thank our partners and our esteemed panelists. We're so thankful and we're so pleased to be working directly with Columbia Global Center in Nairobi, the City Diplomacy Lab, and our partner NGOs, Grow Biointensive Agriculture Center of Kenya, Kenya Biogas, and Neapolitans. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Murugi Durangu, Director of Columbia Global Center, Nairobi, who will serve as our moderator for today.
Thank you, Gail. The students participating in the Global Columbia Collaboratory, friends and colleagues of Columbia Global Centers, Columbia University Center for Undergraduate Global Engagement, the City Diplomacy Lab at CDC Paris, and others from around the globe. I welcome you to our global seminar on rethinking food systems in Africa, the first of 3 seminars in our Healthy City Cities series. My name is Murugi Durangu, and as Gail said, I'm the director of Columbia Global Centers Nairobi. CGC Nairobi, as it is popularly known, is part of a network of 11 centers worldwide founded by Columbia University. The centers serve as knowledge hubs that aim to educate and inspire through research, dialogue, and action. Our centers have proven to be fundamental platforms that create awareness and enhance shared learning opportunities across various themes such as climate change, health, business empowerment, and education. Food systems comprises all food-related processing and distribution activities, such as growing, harvesting, processing, packaging, transporting, marketing, consumption, and distribution. It also includes the necessary inputs and outputs for each step. A shift in food systems from overprocessed and chemically grown foods to the healthy norm of eating a wide variety of nutritious and locally produced natural foods, including indigenous crops and vegetables, is critical in Africa. A healthy and sustainable food system can help people gain strong immune systems, cope with and recover from infectious and non-infectious diseases by eating a well-balanced diet of natural foods. Hence, Agroecology support that strengthens Africa's food markets to be healthy, fair, and sustainable is critical. Growing local and safe foods system also have several advantages, including increased food and income security and strengthening the local economy. Not only does it save money by eliminating waste in plastic packaging, greenhouse emissions, and higher transportation costs associated with imported food, but it also helps to reduce the harm caused by plastic packaging and mitigate environmental damage. Today's seminar will discuss issues and emerging innovative ideas related to the future of African food systems. It will also discuss steps that can be taken to achieve a safe, accessible, sustainable, and equitable food system for African communities. Let me now introduce our panelists for today's seminar. Our first panelist is Dr. CJ Jones. CJ Jones is the founding director of Waze Limited. She has extensive experience in African agriculture, leading market entry, acquisition, due diligence, and business structuring assignments in the private and development sector. She also has experience building cross-cultural teams and reinforcing capacity at all levels. Most recently, CJ has been driving change in African food systems, creating solutions to the multiple problems facing Africa's fractured food system. Through Waze Limited, CJ has also continued to engage in work that looks at the food system of Kenya's vast arid and semi-arid areas, seeking to create a unique food culture to add the experience of both local and international visitors. Our second panelist is Hesbon Omondi Ogundi. Mr. Ogundi is the founder and CEO of Fairways Green Markets, a social enterprise linking farmers to markets and essential services through a digital platform. Hesbon is also a founder of GrowBiz Africa, a management consultancy firm that provides strategic financial management support and skills to small and medium-sized businesses. Hesbon is a sustainable business growth consultant with over 15 years of experience in financial management, operations, and administration in non-governmental and not-for-profit organizations and corporate settings. He is an expert in corporate governance and sustainability reporting in line with the UN SDG 2030 agenda. He has attended the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, Foreign Direct Investment Training for SMEs on Sustainability Reporting, facilitated by the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya in 2021. Our third panelist is Mr. Collins Chibole. He is an agroecology outreach program officer with Grow Biointensive Agriculture Center of Kenya. Collins is a dedicated professional with a strong academic background in Grow Biointensive Agriculture. He has a deep passion for sustainable farming practices. Let me now kick off our seminar and our discussion today. Let me invite CJ Jones to present on rethinking food systems in Africa. Production, processing, distribution, and consumption. Are we asking the right questions? CJ, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for that wonderful intro, Marugi, and welcome fellow panelists, and especially welcome colleagues, students, and people who are really starting to engage, which is probably one of the biggest crises we face coming up. Okay, so this is my very boring PowerPoint, guys. Whoops, is that as big as we can get it, Pauline? Perfect. Okay, so I love the title of this, Rethinking Food Systems in Africa, because I believe very strongly that's exactly what we have to do. We must rethink the entire system of production and distribution, consumption, and very possibly we have to move quite rapidly by leapfrogging certain northern hemisphere innovations into a Kenyan and African context. Thank you, Pauline. Okay, well, our current assumptions and questions. What if they're all wrong? Okay, let me just premise what I'm about to say by the fact that Marugi always knows I'm about to drive her crazy when I give one of these seminars, because I think that it's time that we stopped being complacent. And we need to seriously look at the questions we are asking of ourselves and of the systems around us. And I think one of the most critically fragile and flawed food systems that we face is our own food system. The system is becoming increasingly challenged. We've heard it. Climate change, inappropriate, the heat is changing some of the crops we can grow, rapid population growth, rapid urbanization. They're increasingly frail and fragile, and very soon we're going to start to see the rapid disintegration of a lot of our traditional food systems, which could end in crisis and hunger for a lot of people if we're not really brave now and start to ask and rethink our questions. Even the algorithms and the modeling that we're using to predict climate and weather incidents are now starting to be flawed. Climate change has always been around, always been an incident. I am not a climate change apologist. I've heard some of the big apologists of the world use that excuse. It's always been around. It's true, it has. What Marugi didn't tell you is that I'm also COO of the Turkana Basin Institute, and I've seen their wonderful collections and their soil cores. And we can go back in time in a way that probably few institutions in the world can go back. And there has always been periods of climate change, from humid to dry, back again, and all the iterations in between. What is happening to us now, though, is that the incidence of unpredictable climate shifts are happening more rapidly and in a much more uncontrolled and often catastrophic way. This means that the algorithms that we use to predict our climate patterns and our weather patterns are now very unreliable and flawed. We're also in a period of rapid and unprecedented urbanization. In Kenya alone, urbanization is set to shift population balance from rural to urban within the next 2 decades. This will mean that a lot of people no longer have the capacity even to be subsistence farmers. They will disconnect from the growing systems. They will disconnect, importantly, from their cultural links to food. Don't underestimate the power that food has on our ability to identify ourselves and place ourselves in the context of the country or our origins. So this is a very important issue that will plague us unless we find some new ways to address it. Despite all this, my suggestion is that we persist with the same solutions, the same questions that draws us further and further into some monumental failures of the system. And the questions I would like you all to start asking yourselves, and we can address on these panels, is what if the staples that we now depend on, and here, guys, I'm talking about the big three, maize, rice, and wheat. Other people contend that there are others, potatoes, Irish potatoes, European potatoes is one. But seriously, I want to just, in this seminar, let's just talk about these three. What if we started to diversify our food system and not focused on the mega crops? What would happen? What would we have to rethink? What if our myopic view of food security actually blinds us to the possibilities of a food secure world? And what if, and this is the ones that challenges us the most right now, what if we already had the solutions but refused to pursue them for some antiquated vision of what food security and food sovereignty really means to us. Pauline, thank you. Let's just start with consumption. There's a very telling article in PLOS today, and it's about the simple fact of evolutionary mismatch in diets. Now, for some time, we have known that that there are some foods, particularly in the big three, that cause people to get quite ill, that cause us problems, that are not as nutritious as we think they are, that are in fact much more about filling our tummies, giving people enough carbohydrates to survive. Very few of them are about protein. But certainly, this reliance on the big three is leading to what scientists are now starting to understand is the severe and critical evolutionary mismatch between where more important, where our guts are at and where our food system's at. Our food system has moved much more rapidly, as has urbanization, as has IT, as has the world around us. But our gut is way back in our evolutionary past, and it's changed very, very little. Now, this is not the forum for me to discuss that in detail, but I would refer you, and I will add an active link to my presentation for the PLOS article, which is on open source. But I would challenge you to read it because it will help you try to rethink and redefine some of the things we are thinking about are good for us and our solutions to our food security and our food systems going forward. Remember, cereals and sugar. Now, sugar I haven't included in the big three, but sugar is also a grass that is now causing us considerable difficulties as our food system develops, especially with the fact that the evolutionary mismatch is making the incidence and rise of NCDs much more prolific. It's not the only reason, guys. I'm not suggesting that, but it is a very interesting issue for us now to challenge. For a long time, we've talked about our microbiome and why it's now so flawed. And now the evidence is piling up for this mismatch. Never before have we consumed cereals and sugars in particular in such proportions. Sugar and salt are hidden in our diets. So this is one of the issues we're going to have to address going forward, because I have a very radical contention that I'll share with you as we progress, and that is that the future of food, be it in Africa or the global north, is processed, packaged, and purchased. And our greatest challenge is going to be, how do we get the best things in those packages? We will definitely talk about it a little later. Our guts are not equipped for refined, homogenized, cryovac, feedlot, UHT, ultra-processed, gritless, fiber-added, gluten-enhanced, gluten-free, and I could have gone on. I'm sure most of you. Fad diets, I'm adding there. Food has become something else, while our guts and our metabolic systems are still lagging. Okay? And this is why our food system now really has started to be an appalling burden to us as we move forward. But let's look at some of the other issues. Pauline? What if we started to diversify our food system and not focus on the mega crops? You know, we might have no choice. Climate change, heat, and unpredictable drought are going to change the nature of the mega crops that we have. Wheat is already under severe crisis, and whilst I know there is much research going on how we can get more drought-tolerant wheats, Australia being a leading exponent of this, some areas in the United States, many researchers devoting their life to this. I would contend, and I would suggest, that if you've been brave enough to log into this panel, that you become brave enough to suggest that we need to think past these big three cereal crops to what else we can use. There are many, what we now call the lost grains, that are actually a little better for us because the evolutionary mismatch in our gut is not quite as radical. But nobody's really taken the time to understand the commercialization of those crops properly. And that again is an issue where the finance and investments going into the development of our changing food systems. Again, the money's talking. It's pushing towards the big three. So again, something that I want to challenge you on. How do we get more investment to filter through to some of the lost crops, the lesser grains that might be better for us in the long term and actually help us adapt and cope with what will be ever increasing climate shock as we move forward? I'll give you an example. It's not actually an edible product, but with our technologies now in editing genes, and I'm not raising the issue of GMO here. In Turkana, quite recently, one of our researchers found a grass that can actually survive and continue to thrive at 70 degrees Celsius with very, very little water. So it would be very interesting to know what gives that grass its resilience and to see whether any of the lessons we learned from exploring the success of that grass can be transferred through to some of our food crops. So already we have some of the genesis or the seminal steps to some of our solutions. We just need to be brave enough to work past the big three. Research on more adaptable grasses with higher protein and heat resistance is a must, because way, way back in the early 18th century, a researcher called maize that monstrous grass. It's been used many times before, but I was interested when I was preparing this presentation, how far back did we go calling it such a thing? Well, I'm afraid to say the monstrous grass is now ruling us. I read an interesting book, actually, which talked about how basically maize domesticated us by making us look after it, by settling us down. I apologize in advance that I don't have the name of that book, but if you're interested, I'm sure ChatGPT could tell you who wrote that. But it's seriously a challenging idea that some of these crops that we grow, plants, have actually domesticated us and not the reverse. Okay, this is a dystopian concept, I'd have to say, but one that really does bear thinking about. And really, how would we feel? Because we are so connected emotionally to our food. How would we feel if you couldn't have a corn chip? If you couldn't eat your guacamole with a corn chip? It's a really big question, because that's what keeps us dependent on some things. We're often not ready to move out of that way of thinking. We want what we know and what makes us feel good. It's the taste in the palate. It's the connections it gives us to our past or our loved ones. We have such strong cultural and emotional ties to our food. This is also one of the inhibitors for the changes we're going to have to make. And it's hard to accept that, but we will have to move and think about it. Yeah, no more corn chips. I'm not really sure I could go there myself, but Pauline? Pauline, can we change? What if our myopic view of food security blinds us to the possibilities of food secure world? Okay, what if? What if all of us are equally responsible for, in some subtle ways, encouraging the people who are leading the seed developments in the big three to keep going? Have we ever thought about that? They do it because we buy. That's a simple, simple metric. Business exists because it sells something to consumers. We are consumers. But also, don't fall into the trap of affluence and entitlement. We can choose what we eat. There are millions of people in the world who cannot choose, and an effective food system accommodates all according to their nutrition and health status, and we are all equal in that respect. Here's a simple example of why I believe strongly that we already have many of the solutions which we are turning blind eyes to, particularly in Africa. If we simply shifted the metric on food waste, we would so significantly improve access to food for lower income consumers that we could radically change urban food systems. And before all of you go, that's impossible, CJ, I just want to tell you a story. Marugi told you that I'm also an entrepreneur, and Wawaze is a farm where I am able to accommodate my need, my emotional need for excellent organic food. But I recognize very strongly that organics is a bit of a luxury when we have so many people hovering in a food insecure position. So I have another business called Utu Food for Good. And we are just at the moment raising money on the Series B raise, which is a lot of money. It's in the tens of millions, to produce a product which is highly nutritious, has a 2-year ambient shelf life, and it uses as the basis for both its nutrition and its yumminess, in a way, cosmetic food waste from Kenya's horticultural industry, which produces 22,000 metric tons of cosmetic food waste a year, and that is equivalent to 48 million 500-gram meals if we add a protein to it. Yep, 48 to 50 million 500-gram meals is sent to compost or wasted every year in Kenya. We have built a business repurposing that cosmetic waste using up-to-date processing technology, which allows us to produce a fabulous box of mixed vegetables, beans in a tomato sauce, which is sealed before it's cooked. So a lot of the nutrients are trapped in it, except the water solubles, which no matter what you cook, how you cook, you're going to dissolve some of those. And because of the business model which sits behind that food, the recommended retail price for a 500-gram box, which feeds 2 adults with it if they add a carb, is less than $1.50 US. That's a solution that uses a brand new packaging technology, that uses a very old-fashioned processing system. It's essentially canning. It allows for cheaper and more effective distribution. It, most importantly, and I find this the most important issue about Utu, is that it has a 2-year ambient shelf life. So for high-density urban dwellers, that means it doesn't need a fridge. That's a very, very important metric to always remember. Refrigeration and distribution of foods that need refrigeration or must be kept in a cold chain, aka fresh vegetables, needs to be rethought. We are already making smart changes to packaging and packaging technology. There's investment pouring into it, and we need greater ambient shelf lives. We need greater food safety. We need to adopt technology, not just for access to market, but for the way we produce our food and the way we move our food, to the consumers. And I don't mean in a truck. I mean, in what packaging are we moving it? Is the packaging recyclable? Is it future-proofing us? All of these questions can be addressed now. And they are getting cheaper and cheaper as consumers demand more. Consumers themselves took MSG and E numbers off boxes, and most of the world now demands, including in Africa, in low-income consumers spaces, demanding clean labels. Okay? And we must get rid of the contention that poor people, whatever poor is, should only have poor people's food. This is an inappropriate and fallacious assumption. All people deserve the very best, and all people should be able to have fun and enjoy their food. And it should be accessible, affordable, and above all, food safe. So we have to get these metrics away. We also have to get rid of the fallacious assumption that urban populations any longer, particularly in Africa, particularly in Kenya, retain a food past or a connection to a village. Increasing urbanization driven by urban growth itself means that there are now a higher number of Kenyans in urban high-density areas who don't have a connection to a village. So their food and their food choices are being determined by very different things. That means that their consumption patterns are changing rapidly. Their desires, wants, and needs in relation to food are changing rapidly. We must rethink our distribution and the delivery systems that we use for people like this. So these are very challenging issues, not often dealt with because people always want to deal on the production side. Okay? Urban populations now, Kenya in particular, are increasingly young. They get their food ideas from social media, Instagram and TikTok. And I just point you to have a look on Instagram at how many people follow a couple of influencers who basically have the hashtag Kenyan foodie. They're phenomenal. And that tells us something. These are not people with high disposable incomes. They have some discretionary spend, and they're spending it on interesting food, not the big three. Pauline? And lastly, what if we already had the solutions? Well, I've gone on about it enough, guys. Truth is, we do. Yet we keep looking in the wrong direction. We're focusing on the old stuff. I never want to hear anybody talk to me about a green revolution in Africa again. I don't know anybody who wants to be a subsistence farmer or a small farmer these days with rising costs. And with our inheritance systems on land the way they are, it's going to be very difficult for us to change the metric and start to get bigger farms with better economies of scale. So let's start challenging people in different areas. Why break apart their whole cultural fabric when in fact we could have solutions that didn't do that, that allowed them to have their plots and their pieces of land? But we just didn't insist they were also completely responsible for the destruction of our food security in Kenya, which I've actually heard some politicians saying. We in the global south can do what we did with mobile money. Leapfrog the problems, leapfrog the old solutions, leapfrog the things that didn't work. Learn from their mistakes and missteps. Pick the very best and most appropriate things for us. Looking at processing, looking at packaging, looking at more effective distribution systems. Dukas are here to stay. They turn over money in a much different way. They buy in stock in a different way. There are lots and lots now of mobile money solutions to suit Duka traders. What's still the problem is how do we get them product that they can leave on dusty shelves, that remain food safe over time. Young Africans, particularly in Kenya, are urban, young, 75% of our population is below 35, connected, influenced, and they're very on top of global trends, including in food. And they increasingly have enough discretionary spend every week in their salaries to start to think of new novel purchases, particularly in packaged food and processed food. The challenge going forward for us is how do we make that inevitable shift, the very best processed and packaged food? We've already know sugar, salt out. What else can we process that's going to tick the boxes of young consumers who are increasingly health conscious, by the way? We need, which is absolutely perfect. And again, just to be truly provocative, I guess, we need to push back the global north when they tell us we need a green revolution in Africa. Perhaps what we really need is a new green industrial revolution where the concept of processed, packaged, and purchased foods is at the very heart of the new big solution for how we're going to feed our cities going forward. So I'm sorry that sounded a little bit like a diatribe, guys, but I think that we all must challenge ourselves now to a different set of thinking on how we're going to deal with this shift in where our food system has to go. Because food, like the title of these seminars suggests, African cities are flourishing, they're growing, and they're demanding more of us. And they're demanding more of us as food systems thinkers. And if we sit around with our hands under our thighs going, yep, it's got to be a green revolution, I swear, we're all going to be food insecure. So let's rethink processed, packaged, purchased, make it nutritious and yummy and connecting to something deep inside ourselves as we move forward. Thanks for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions. Stunned into silence, everybody.
No. Thank you very much, CJ, for that very thought-provoking and presenting a lot of challenging questions. I think our audience is digesting your very thoughtful questions, and we'll be looking into the Q&A after we have listened to the other two presenters. So I encourage our audience to please jot down your Q&A, your questions in the Q&A box, so that we'll be able to go through them and present them to our panelists to answer after they've done the presentation. Let me also ask kindly, if you have been labeled or your name appears as Anya and you're not Anya, please change your name on the upper right-hand corner of your box so that we are able to identify who is in session. So thank you, CJ. Let me now invite our yeah, you're welcome. Thank you very much. Let me now invite Hesbon Ogundi to present on food system challenges and how we can overcome them. Hesbon, karibu.
Thank you. Dr. Murugi. It is my pleasure to be here and among the academicians. I present myself as a farmer, so and I'm actually making this presentation from the farm, literally. been down at the farm doing what we set up as Fairways Green Markets to do, working with farmers. And as we look at the food the food systems challenges in Africa, I must admit that Fairways Green Markets was founded to find solutions to some of the challenges to food systems. And these challenges, it came to our realization when COVID hit us, and it hit us very badly. That it found the underbelly of our health system so weak, and so we asked ourselves, what is it that we can actually do to make our food system stronger, so that our immune system is stronger. So when we talk about food systems, Dr. Morogi has already elaborated what our food systems are, but some of the challenges that face our food systems today is food insecurity and malnutrition, climate change, poverty, and conflict. And when we talk about the food insecurity and malnutrition, there are several things that cause that. And when you look at Africa today, as has been properly presented, we have more than 200 million people who don't have enough to eat. And yet that number is actually growing year by year. It is not going down. So we are actively seeking to tackle these issues of food insecurity through our ongoing campaigns. And one of our mission involves mobilizing and educating farmers to implement strategies that enhance food security. And we also recognize that it is not solely about ensuring an abundance of food. It is equally important that we give people nutritious and healthy food. And as Dr. CJ has elaborated, there are several options that can actually, options of foods that we can actually grow to make sure that we are actually eating healthy and nutritious foods. We have a growing number of our population that are facing food insecurity and malnutrition. And that number is not just about to go down. We know that over 60% of our population, African population, is actually living in cities. So as we tackle the issues of food challenge, of food insecurity, some of the things that we can actually do to tackle food insecurity properly is actually to create awareness, and campaign to help improve what we call the urban farming. There's still a lot of space in urban farming. I did a little survey last year of people who have land within the cities, the city of Nairobi, for example, and they're not using it. And there were so many people who just wanted, who said they have land that they're not using. And if we can use it to produce food for them, they will be very happy. And because of lack of resources, then we could not be able to take up all those opportunities. And so there's a lot that needs to be done about urban farming. Actually, the problem is not because we don't have land, and the problem is not because that we don't have enough resources. It is because the farmers, it is the people who we expect to do farming that are actually running away from farming. And so that presents the next problem. That is yeah, so I'll be able to talk about the farmer problem in the next slide, but we also have the issues of climate change that is reducing crop yield by about 2%. So we need to do education, and we are actually doing that in helping farmers to adopt climate resilient farming practices. We have done that in our farmers open days in Migori and in Moroni. Cross diversification, I can't emphasize that or overemphasize that because Dr. CJ has already talked about that. Access to sustainable energy, which is one of the challenges that is facing farmers. And in our demo farm, model farm in Moroni, we are using sustainable energy and creating awareness to farmers on how they can actually use these alternatives to make to increase their production. And of course, we are doing community education and awareness. And this we are also doing. We are starting out a pilot program with the schools so that we can be able to work with the in line with the CBC, the new curriculum, to make sure that education on agriculture penetrates the next generation. It will shock you that as I went into farming, I noticed that my own daughter, who is in class 8, doing class 8 this year, does not know a lot about agriculture. It is because for many years, the education system scrapped away agriculture, scrapped off agriculture from the curriculum. So I have two daughters. Both of them are candidates. One is in grade 6, and the other one is in class 8. And the one in grade 6 is very interested in agriculture, and we do a lot of farming together. The one in class 8 looks at agriculture like those are some strange things. And so our education system, especially the one that we are facing out, has had a lot to do with the low productivity and lack of awareness about agriculture. And as we move forward, we're actually working with partnerships and collaborations. And this is to make sure that certain facilities and that farmers need to improve their production, like solar irrigation systems, like the modern mulching techniques are available to help farmers because of there is a need to avert the effects of climate change. Now, the other challenge that we must address is the poverty. And poverty is, I've divided the poverty challenge into two. We have food poverty and we have farmer poverty. So the food poverty is measured based on the number of households that are not able to feed themselves. And this is estimated to be, like, for example, in Nairobi, about 25%, while those of other cities in Kisumu, Mombasa, and Nakuru are between 20, 15, and 10% respectively. Now, food security in the urban settings can be overcome by making the food accessible and affordable. And that is why when we started off the Fairways Green Markets, we wondered how then can we make the food available to the hands of the modern, the urban dwellers. And that is how we started the Kilimo. Kilimo is a mobile or a digital platform that helps consumers access food from the farmers. And that is important because the price of food in the market where the consumers buy and the price of food at the farm are two worlds apart in time. When you go to the farmers, which we did at the early stages of our start in the year 2020, we realized that the farmers sell at throwaway price, and we who dwell in the cities are crying that the prices of food commodities, groceries, are extremely expensive. So the Kilimo app comes to bridge the gap to make sure that what the farmer sells is the price at which the farmer sells is produce is the price at which the consumer gets their produce without the middleman in between. And so that is one way that we seek to reduce the food poverty. But of course, when we as we walk along, we also realize that the inputs are becoming a major issue. And so we have also using Kilimo, we have created a platform, that platform to link farmers directly to the people who sell inputs, and including the people who provide professional services like agrovets. So agrovets and agronomists are available on the platform for farmers to be able to buy services and inputs to help them be productive, because costs of inputs skyrocket and making the food very expensive. Here again, one of the other things that the costs that we have to look at, and I think if you have, for those people who have been watching the news, last week there was a documentary that gave a gloomy picture of our food system in Kenya, where over 50% of the inputs are dangerous, are chemicals that are actually are likely to cause major chronic illnesses. And so, as part of our work as Fairways Green Markets is to identify some of these some of the producers of healthy organic inputs and organic fertilizers and organic pesticides, so that they are they're available on the platform. And as we speak, we are at advanced stages of signing an MOU, an agreement with the one major producer globally, to be able to make those inputs available to our farmers. And so the other thing that we must do to reduce the food poverty rate in the cities is what I alluded to earlier. We call it urban farming. Urban farming is one thing that can help us convert our backyards and balconies to some food, and even if it is not the grocery, it can be healthy herbs like lemongrass tea or rosemary that you can take in the evening. And I can tell you that I am a testimony of that. Beginning of 2020, when COVID hit, because of the lockdown, I was able to start Fairways Green Markets. At the same time, I was able to test that it is actually possible to do farming from the balcony. And based on the produce, which were basically herbs, I escaped the flu, and not just the flu, the COVID flu, but all flus that came between 2020, 2021, 2022 did not catch me. And the first flu that caught me was in July 2023, when I lowered my guard. So it is actually possible to promote urban farming and increase, reduce the rate of food poverty. Now, I want to go to the next, which is, I think, my pet subject is farmer poverty. We realize that 80% of food is produced by smallholder farmers in Africa. 80% of food consumed in Africa is produced by smallholder farmers. And these smallholder farmers use only 30% of agricultural land. So they own only 30% of agricultural land in Africa. And yet, as much as they produce, 80% of the food produced by consumed in Africa are produced by smallholder farmers. 70% of smallholder farmers live below the poverty line. And this is the reason why we have reduced productivity in our land. And that is why we will continue to have less and less food coming to feed the cities. When you go to the farmers, you ask them, why is it that they are not producing and there's so much idle land around, even around here where I'm speaking from. There's so much idle land into 20 hectares, 30 hectares, 100 and above. And it is because the farmers are not getting income, proportionate income that matches their effort on the farm. And if we do not address that, even if we bring any other solution, the food production is not going to go up, because we'll still depend on the same farmer to produce the alternative nutritious food. We'll still depend on that farmer to adapt to climate smart agriculture, which we are really trying to help them adapt. But if the market price is not favorable to the farmer, the farmers get discouraged and they abandon their farms to go and do other things. And what are these other things? I'm going to sit in an office to earn a fraction of what they would have earned if the market was fair. So when we're talking about the food systems, we know, Dr. Murugi had introduced, it involves the entire stakeholders, all the participants in the food chain, from production to consumption. But most of the times we speak about the consumers and the people who process the food, but we forget about the welfare of the farmers. And this is where this is the elephant in the room. If we are not able to address the farmer and the income that they get, then we are sugarcoating the issue, and we will continue to have more idle land and more mouths to feed. And that means that we'll continue to importing more food across the borders. So as we go along, we know for fair West markets, we're using our demo to improve productivity. We're helping farmers learn how they can utilize small plots for optimum production. We are looking at producer partnerships to address the high cost of fertilizers, and we've partnered with producers of organic fertilizers and pesticides so that farmers can be accessing low cost of inputs. Then what we're doing as Kilimo, using our Kilimo marketplace, is to create and enable direct market access by smallholder farmers. And so we are working on partnerships and collaborations opportunities, and we are actually willing and ready to work with as many. Today, as we speak, we have been able to secure a grant to make sure that our demo farm is actually climate smart. We will be installing the irrigation kits on the farm. We'll be installing greenhouse on the farm in the next in a few months, and so this is going to be a very the perfect place where the community around can actually learn how to make farming, how to be productive, and how to make farming help them improve their livelihoods. And because if we don't address the farmer livelihood, then we are not addressing the real issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hesbon, for that very insightful presentation. If you could stop sharing. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you so much on pointing out, highlighting the role of education and engaging the youth, and how it's important to support the farmer if you're going to have healthy food systems, and for us to be able to avoid food poverty and also decrease farmer poverty. So those are very insightful thoughts, and I think you're doing great work on with your project. So we will continue on, and I'll hand it off to Gail for the next activity.
Sure. So we have, as this is part of the Global Columbia Collaboratory, we've invited students to speak or to ask a question. And so I want to introduce our student who's volunteered to ask. His name is Dylan Campos. And Dylan is a senior at Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut. He's majoring in history and environmental studies, and his past experience in environmental activism and nonprofit work guides his research on urban farming, sustainable agriculture, and global food security. And I noticed students have to submit an application to apply to get into the collaboratory. And in Dylan's application, I was caught by how he really has a passion and curiosity about urban food insecurity in particular, and the larger agricultural industrial complex. And so I think what he's heard today will fit really well with Dylan's question. And so I want to have him, well, he's on screen now, and I'll turn it over for Dylan to ask his question of the panelists. And thank you, Dylan, and thank you to all our collaboratory students and other people of the public who are listening today. Take it away.
Yes, thank you, Gail, for that lovely introduction. And thank you to both of our speakers. I really appreciated your presentations and getting to hear from you. My question for whoever's up to answer is, given the struggles and difficulties that we know now that impact many African cities when it comes to city and regional planning, and the difficulties in distribution of resources and food, how do we believe that, as a possible solution, urban gardens and urban farming are a way to mitigate that kind of food insecurity and hunger amongst sort of urban populations?
I'll give you my view first, but Hesbon, I just wanted to say thank you for such an insightful presentation. I think that your comments on farmer poverty are really overlooked. So I really appreciated that. So well done, and I'll look forward to receiving the PowerPoint when it comes out. Dylan, I think one of the realities of urban farming is it's not really going to be one of the big solutions, sadly. I think we've had examples of urban farming. I mean, urban farming is also a misunderstood term. So there's sort of urban farming, and then there's the sorts of farming that goes on in the peri-urban areas around Nairobi, where a lot of food is generated. But the farms tend to be bigger and much better managed, and they capitalize very much on the shorter transport and distribution line that they're able to use to get into cities. Some people, however, interpret urban farming to mean, you know, I'll give you an example. In Kibera, not long ago, not some time ago now, actually, just to show my age, really, there was a really lot of money invested in cleaning up the sides of the barely used railway line of rubbish and using that to plant leafy greens. Now, in theory, that's a good idea because one of our food deserts is Kibera. It's very difficult to move food into that very, very dense and under-regulated space, you know, it's dangerous. You know, fresh food only moves in there occasionally, once or twice a week. It always looks horrible. So let's grow some fresh stuff. It grew because there was a level of fertility in that those rubbish areas when they cleaned it up. But when we did the samples on those leafy greens, every single one of them was so high in lead and other contaminants that they became toxic for human consumption. And it was very difficult then to convince people, oh, sorry, we made a mistake. Don't eat that, destroy it, you know? So it's a complex issue. In principle, I'd like to see everybody do what Hesbon does and have their own balcony gardens. Some people don't have balconies. We've even tried bag gardens in high density areas, you know, the bag with just a few plants in it or the holes on the side like an old strawberry bag. And one of our community members said, the best thing about one of these bag gardens is that when it fails, I can sit on it. So I think we need to re-ask the question, what do we want the urban vegetable garden to do? You know, there's the peri-urban ones, which are successful. Hesbon himself talked about them. They're very successful. And then there's this really, really urban. And how would that work? And how do we deal with the issues of contaminants, boredom, not producing enough, you know, not enough to keep people interested. So, but I think it's a really interesting question. And I'm challenging you to figure out how we can actually do it so that it's meaningful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I guess as a quick follow-up to preface that, I think in my head I was seeing that very urban farming and gardening more as a way to sort of reclaim action and connection to food, as in a way
Brilliant.
that I feel like it's very like disconnected amongst urban people. So
for that reason, totally 100% on board. I cannot live anywhere in an urban area if I don't have a plant or something growing. And it is that cultural connection. It's that sense of nature and reality again. But will that solve the problems of food insecurity? I'm doubting. Unless young folks like you rethink the whole issue and come up with a out-of-the-box solution.
Thank you, CJ. Hesbon, do you want to add anything?
Yes, I want to add that the solution that the urban gardening or urban farming brings to the food system is a solution of the demand and supply. Because when for the students of economics, you know, the higher the demand, if the demand is high and supply is low, then the price automatically goes up. And that, if the price goes up, the poor urban, who are stricken by poverty and not able to access food at the higher price, are not able to afford that food. So when we have a lot of the middle class who have a garden in their backyard, if we're able to turn those gardens into food producing gardens instead of flower gardens, then we slowly start to reduce the pressure, the demand pressure on the food systems, and then it can now become affordable to the majority who are, for example, who are living in the slums, or in the apartments where they don't have enough space to grow their own food. So it is not it's not the only solution to the food system challenges. It is just but one of the many solutions.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Hesbon. I'm looking at our Q&A, and we have a number of questions from our audience. There's one here, and I think two people have asked kind of a similar question, so I'll combine them. An anonymous attendee didn't give me their name. They're asking, where can we learn more about this topic, and what are you suggesting? What are the resources that you can link us to learn more about? And then Jack Torres says that, where is his question? I've seen it. It's similar questions, that there are clearly many problems, some of which need solution, some of which have solutions but need implementation. For students looking to be part of a solution to food insecurity, hunger, and climate change impacts, who is needed? As students, who must we become? What skills, expertise, or roles are lacking? What must we practice and study in order to be productive parts of this solution? So I guess it's how to become involved and engaged, and where do they get more information about this topic? Hesbon, do you want to take that first, and then we'll listen to CJ?
When I got this invitation, I was interviewing and looking for students to deploy to help us be part of the solution, especially in the local community. We were actually interviewing about 12 students who had expressed their interest to be interns on the ground, to be community educators, and help make sure that the solutions are actually implemented on the ground. So I think Jack Torres has said, there are so many solutions, but to be part of the solution, or be part of the journey, is just a matter of opening your eyes and changing your mindset. Personally, I'm not an agriculturalist. I am an accountant by profession. And but I started this journey having done self-study to be able to start and see what we can do, what solutions I can offer to the food systems in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hesbon. CJ, what are your thoughts?
I think it's a great question. Like, where do you find out? Because you can, I think that the thing I would counsel really strongly is you don't just find out from the textbooks. I mean, I would be even doing things like reading company reports. Like, where is the investment flowing? What are people starting to invest in? Have a look at some of the results of even, and think broader than the food itself. Think outside the box, if you could excuse the pun. But, you know, what are the new solutions in distribution? What are the new solutions in finance? What are the new solutions in packaging? And then what about the new solutions in processing itself? I mean, we are getting better and better at processing and producing and creating more shelf-stable foods. And this is going to be our future. We are going to have more shelf-safe food. So I think that there is a plethora of research written on food systems. Again, look outside the box. Don't just look at food systems. Look at health. Look at some of the medical journals, the open source like PLOS. I think some of Nature's even available. Look at the company reports. Read the newspapers. But above all, be critical and challenging. Don't just accept it as is. I mean, it's very easy for us to beat up the big companies, and most times they deserve it. But really dig deep and try to analyze what is behind their thinking. Consumers, that's we all, drive their decision making. They'll only do it if there's a buyer. So also, be more aggressive with your feet. Walk if it's not what you want, and keep up the questions. because otherwise we're going to go down the rabbit hole of everybody's going to be eating GMO, and we're going to stick with the big three and the monstrous grass well into the future. There's a question too about millet, Marugi. I didn't want to preempt you there, but it does speak to this. You know, millet and some of these sort of forgotten peripheral grains, teff, for instance, need a lot more work. So if I was young and I was choosing a career again, I would seriously think about issues of those grains and how they're going to be commercialized. Don't leave them out in the cold. Bring them into the center and make them a real option for people to grow. AKA, we start buying it in volume. We change the policy around how people grow it. We make the farmers value it because they get good returns. So without those other things, it's not going to change.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes. And as part of that question, there's a question about how to preserve. It's been asked by a student from the Gambia and also Anya, or someone named Anya. How do we make sure that we're preserving the African food culture so that some food varieties don't go extinct? And also, how do we integrate indigenous foods into our food system and making sure that they are part of what we are calling a healthy diet? Maybe Hesbon, you can take that.
Thank you, Dr. Murugi. I think that question is on point. The indigenous food, the African indigenous foods are actually becoming extinct. And if we don't do anything about it today, it will be they will go into history. Now, what we need to do to bring them back is I think we need a lot of promotion and create more awareness into about these foods, and especially the nutritious effect of it. When I was growing up, eating the indigenous vegetables, some of them like spaghetti, managu, was a sign of poverty. And that is how these foods have been associated with poverty to date. But today, I would go and take any of these African indigenous vegetables anytime. I actually grow them myself, and I would prefer them over anything, including the meat, the white or red meat. But the reason why we put them in the back of is because of that poverty mindset. We were made to look like if you eat those foods, you are from a poor family. And so we need to reverse this. We need to reverse this perception. To do that, there's need for more awareness. And awareness, especially at the urban settings, then going down. When the urban dwellers realize the nutritious effect of those foods, then there will be more demand for them, and it will be grown. The farms, farmers are more than willing to grow them, but it's only that they need to know that there is a market, and they will be able to get fair value for their work. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Marugi, can I just comment on that?
Yes, please.
I think that the whole position with indigenous foods is a really important one, and a very important one that we must remain connected to. I think it's a very complex problem, though, and from experience, I find this is where one of the issues that we didn't discuss in our conversation. How does marketing and social media impact our food choices? Because Hesbon, I'd actually, having spent many years, as Marugi knows, in the nutrition sector, people are not turned on by nutritious food. Sometimes, in fact, it has a reverse issue in that when you tell them it's nutritious, they think it probably tastes like, it's probably awful to eat then. I'm not going to choose that. I'll choose McDonald's instead, or KFC. Okay, so even in my own businesses, when we canvass consumers, nutritious was the least sexy thing about the food, believe it or not. It's not what drives eating aspiration. So I think that we have to sort of work really closely with how do we get people to start talking about this food as if it's trendy and new and something that, you know, is uniquely African and connects us to our past and is going to build depth into our cultural experiences and things. And it's yummy. So, you know, things like get a few celebrity chefs to start using it. Let's get Gordon Ramsay or some of our fabulous Kenyan chefs to start using managu and spiderweed and terere and, you know, all of those things, sweet potato leaves. Let's get them to cook up something fabulous. And in a way that people might recognize or that it becomes social media worthy. Then people are going to start demanding it. Then we'll drive demand. And then we're going to drive farmer income. But I'm 100% on board with it. So let's go. Let's get people eating managu. And
Yeah,
very important.
Thank you very much, CJ. In the last minute, I saw Collins joined us. Collins, you may not be able to give us your full presentation. I think we will get your slides and share with our audience. But I'm inviting you now to just say a few words. We have very few minutes remaining. Welcome, Collins. Are you with us now? Unmute yourself if you're here. I saw you had raised your hand. Okay, I guess he's maybe not with us. Looking through the questions there, I also want to maybe read a question from one of the students from other universities who are participating here that they had shared previously with 4 minutes on our clock. There's a question from, let me see, from Anata from Columbia University. She's asking, he or she is asking that if it's not too personal, I'm curious how you found your way to your position in the field of African food systems today. To what extent do you feel individual background and identity play a significant role in forming approaches to this type of work? CJ, you want to go first? And keep it short as we are running out of time.
Whoa, that's a big question to keep short. How did I find my way to it?
Yes.
Food is our very center. It's not just sustenance. It's everything. It's emotion, it's cultural connection. And African food systems, well, I'm an African who chose Africa. So for me, it's even more important that I have very strong points to connect in. I wasn't born here, but I chose to become a citizen of Africa. So for me, the cultural connections, the emotional links, the exciting possibilities of African foods has been really important. And then I've overlaid that with my background as an investment banker, as an entrepreneur, and as business builder to make sure that all of this is included. So even in processed packaged purchased food systems. So it's a bit of an emotional and personal answer, but it helps me to be connected.
Yeah, thank you very much, CJ. Hesbon, if you don't mind, very briefly. How did you find yourself in this world? Yes.
Like I said, I am an accountant by profession. But my interest was intrigued into the food systems as a result of the effect of COVID-19 on our population. And because I believed that we had a strong immunity systems, then based on the stories and the stories of the effect of COVID-19, which were affecting people that I knew almost personally, I started the journey to discover what has weakened our immunity system. And so I started asking my questions, the many whys, why and why. So, and I got to the level of to the place where food system, our weak food systems was the ultimate answer to why our immunity system was low and prone to COVID-19. And so that is how I found myself here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Wonderful insight. So thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you for your very thoughtful and insightful presentations. We have a lot of questions that we were not able to get to, but we will get them all answered by our panelists, and we'll share them as we share our recording. I also want to now thank all our participants who are here with us today. Thank you for participating and listening in, and the questions that you shared, the comments that you shared, we really value them, and we'll try to get them back to you for the questions as much as possible. So thank you, panelists, and let me invite Gail to say a word of farewell as we sign off. Gail?
Thank you, Marugi, and thank you so much, Hesborn and CJ. It was amazing, and I just want to say again that our students come from all over the world, as our listeners have today, and just connecting and learning more about the issues around food security, food systems, farmers, is really helpful to our students. And they'll take what they're learning and they'll apply it and they'll go forth. So this is, I think by creating these global connections, we can start to make a difference, plant those seeds, to use that metaphor. And so it's just really, it's been great. And thanks once again to Columbia Global Centers, Marugi, Pauline, and others in Nairobi for this help. Thank you so much, and we really appreciate it.
Bye, everyone. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.